Chapter 7. Look Who's Talking. Have you ever noticed some strange or disturbing thought pop into your head and wonder, where did that come from? Have you ever been chided for not paying attention and said, sorry, I was somewhere else? Do you ever suddenly realize that your mind has wandered? If we look more closely at this expression, we can see that the point is something rather curious. Where did that brow come from? And where did it go? And if you were somewhere else, then where were you? And how did you get back from there? LCD answered these questions by teaching you to recognize the different part of yourself and the thinking self, the observing self. The thinking self is the part of you that thinks, plans, judges, compares, creates, imagines, visualizes, analyzes, remembers, daydreams, and fantasizes. A more common name for it is the mind. Popular psychological approaches such as positive thinking, cognitive therapy, creative visualization, hypnosis, and neuro-linguistic programming all focus on controlling the way your thinking self operates. This is all great in theory and it appeals to our common sense, but as we have seen, the thinking self is just not this easy control. Again, it's not that we have no control. After all, throughout this book, we look at many ways to think more effectively. It's just that we have much less control than the experts would have us believe. The observing self is fundamentally different from the thinking self. The observing self does not think it is the part of you that is responsible for focus, attention, and awareness. While it can observe or pay attention to your thoughts, it cannot produce them. Whereas the thinking self thinks about your experience, the observing self registers your experience directly. For example, if you are playing basketball, cricket, or tennis, and you are totally focused, then all your attention is riveted on the ball coming towards you. This is your observing self at work. You are not thinking about the ball, you are observing it. Now, suppose thoughts start popping into your head like, I hope my grip is correct, I would better make this a good hit, or wow, that ball is moving fast. That is your thinking self at work. And of course, such a thought can often be distracting. If your observing self pays too much attention to those thoughts, then it is no longer focused on the ball, and your performance will be impaired. How often have you been focused on a task only to be distracted by a thought such as, I hope I don't screw this up? Or suppose you're watching a magnificent sunset, there are moments when all you are doing is looking at it. Your mind is quiet, there are no thoughts running through your head, you're simply registering the many colors of this spectacle before. This is your observing self at work, observing, not thinking. Then your thinking self kicks in. Wow, look at all those colors. This reminds me of the sunset we saw on the holidays last year. I wish I had my camera. It's so beautiful. This looks like something out of a movie. The more attention you are observing self pays to the running commentary of the thinking self, the more you lose direct contact with that sunset. Although we all understand words such as awareness, focus, and attention, most of us in the Western world have little or no concept of the observing self. As a result, there is no common word for it in the English language. We only have the word mind, which is generally used to denote both the thinking self and the observing self without distinguishing between the two. To reduce confusion whenever I used the word mind in this book, I am referring only to the thinking self. When I use terms like attention, awareness, observing, noticing, and direct experience, I'm referring to various aspects of the observing self. As this book progresses, you will learn how to tune in and use this amazingly potent part of you. Let's begin right now with a simple exercise. Thinking versus observing. Close your eyes for 1 minute and simply notice what your mind does. Stay on the lookout for any thoughts or images as if you were a wildlife photographer waiting for an exotic animal to emerge from the undergrowth. If no thoughts or images appear, keep watching. Sooner or later they will show themselves. I guarantee it. Notice where those thoughts or images seems to be located: in front of you, above you, behind you, to one side of you, or within you. Once you have done this, for a minute, open your eyes again. That's all there is to it. So read through these instructions once again, then put down the book and give it a go. What you experienced were two distinct processes going on. First, there was the process of thinking, in other words, some thoughts or images appear. Then there was the process of observing, that is, you were able to notice or observe those thoughts and images. It's important to experience the distinction between thinking and observing because as the book goes on, we will be using each process in different ways, such as try the above exercise and once more, and close your eyes for about a minute. Notice what thoughts or images appear and notice where they seem to be located. Hopefully, the title exercise gives you a sense of distance between you and your thoughts. Thoughts and image appear, then disappear again, and you were able to notice them come and go. Another way of putting this is that your thinking self produces some thoughts and your observing self observes them. Our thinking self is a bit like a radio, constantly playing in the background. Most of the time it's a radio and a gloom show, broadcasting negative stories. 24 hours a day it reminds us of bad things from the past, it warns us the bad things to come in the future, and it gives us regular updates on everything that's wrong with us. Once in a while, it broadcasts something useful or cheerful, but not too often. So if we are constantly tuned into this radio, listening to it intently, and worse, believing everything we hear, then we have a surefire recipe for stress and misery. Unfortunately, there is no way to switch off this radio. Even Zen masters are unable to achieve such a feat. Sometimes the radio will stop of its own accord for a few seconds or even very rarely for a few minutes, but we don't just have the power to make it stop unless we short-circuit it with the drugs, alcohol, or brain surgery. In fact, generally speaking, the more we try to make this radio stop, the louder it plays. But there is an alternative approach. Have you ever had a radio playing in the background, but you were so intent on what you were doing that you didn't really listen to it? You could hear the radio playing, but you were not paying attention to it in the practicing diffusion skills. We are ultimately aiming to do precisely that with our thoughts. Once we know that thoughts are just bits of language, we can treat them like a background noise. We can let them come and go without focusing on them and without being bothered by them. This is basic simplified by the thinking your mind technique. An unpleasant thought appears, but instead of focusing on it, you simply acknowledge its presence, thank your mind, and return your attention to what you are doing. So here is what we are aiming for with all this diffusion skill. If the thinking self is broadcasting something unhelpful, the observing self need not pay attention. The observing self can instead focus its attention on what you are doing here and now. If the thinking self is broadcasting something useful or helpful, then the observing self can tune in and pay attention. This is very different from approaches such as positive thinking, which are like airing a second radio show, radio happy and cheerful alongside radio doom and gloom. In the hope of drowning it out, it's pretty hard to stay focused on what you are doing when you have the radios playing different tunes in the background. Notice too that letting the radio play on without giving it much attention is very different from actively trying to ignore it. Have you ever heard the radio playing and tried not to listen to it? What happened? The more you tried not to hear it, the more it bothered you, right? The ability to let the thoughts come and go in the background while you keep your attention on what you're doing is very useful. Suppose you are in a social situation and your mind is saying, I'm so boring, I have nothing to say, I wish I could go home. It's hard to have a good conversation if you are giving all your attention to those thoughts. Similarly, suppose you are learning to drive and your thinking self is saying, I cannot do this. It's too hard, I'm going to crash. It's hard to drive. Well, if your observing self is focused on those thoughts rather than on the road, the following technique will teach you how to let your thoughts pass on by while you keep your attention on what you are doing. 10 deep breaths. Take 10 deep breaths as slowly as possible. You may prefer to do this with your eye closed. Focus on the rise and fall of your rib cage and the air moving in and out of your lung. Notice the sensation as the air flow in and your chest rising, your shoulders lifting, and your lungs expanding. Notice what you feel as the air flows out, your chest falling, your shoulders dropping, the breath leaving your nostril. Focus on completely emptying your lung. Push out every last bit of air, feeling your lung deflate, and pause for a moment before breathing in again. As you breathe in, notice how your tummy gently pushed outward. Now let any thought and image comes and go in the background as if they were cars passing by outside of your house. When a new thought or image appears, briefly acknowledge its presence as if you were nodding at the passing motorist. As you do this, keep your attention on the breath, following the air as it flows in and out of your lung. You may find it helpful to silently say to yourself, thinking, whenever a thought or image appears. Many people find this helps them to acknowledge and let go of the thoughts. Give it a go, and if it's helpful, keep doing it. From time to time, a thought will capture your attention. It will hook you and carry you away, so that you'll lose track of the exercise. The moment you realize you have been take a second to notice what distracted you. Then gently unhook yourself and refocus on your breathing. Now read through the instructions once more, then put the book down and give this a go. How did you go? Most people get hooked up and carried away by their thoughts several times during the exercise, and this is how thoughts typically affect us. They reel us in, pulling our attention away from what we are doing. So although we may say that our mind wanders, this is not accurate. In reality, it's our attention that wanders. By regularly practicing this technique, you will learn 3 important skills. 1. How to let go the thoughts come and go without focusing on them. 2. How to recognize when you have been hooked by your thoughts. 3. How to gently unhook yourself from thoughts and refocus your attentions. When practicing this technique, notice the distinction between your thinking self and your observing self. The observing self focuses on the breath, and while the thinking self chatter away in the background. Notice also that this is an accepting strategy, not a control strategy. We are not trying to change, avoid, or get rid of unwanted thoughts. We are simply allowing them to be there, to come and go as they please. Further, not that it is an easy technique to practice because you can do it anytime and anywhere. Therefore, aim to practice this exercise throughout the day while you are stuck at the traffic light, waiting in line at a store, and while you are on hold on the telephone, waiting for someone to get ready during television commercial break, and when you are having your morning tea or coffee, and in bed last thing at night or before you get up. Basically, try it anytime you have a moment to spare. If you don't have time for the full 10 breaths, even 3 or 4 can be useful. In particular, try it anytime you realize that you are all catch up in your thoughts. Remember, when you are doing this technique, it doesn't matter how many times you get hooked. Each time you notice it and unhook yourself, you are getting more proficient at a valuable skills. When doing this technique, let go of any expectation. Simply notice what the effect it has when you do it, and many people find it quite relaxing. But please don't regard it as a relaxation technique. When relaxation occurs, remember it's merely a beneficial byproduct, not the main aim. Obviously, enjoy it when it does occur, but don't come to expect it, or sooner or later you are bound to be disappointed. I have designed the above brief exercise for busy people who say they don't have enough time in the day to do formal diffusion practice. However, not enough time is just another story. So here is a challenge for you. If you really want to get good at this, then as well as doing all those brief exercises, put aside 5 minutes twice a day to practice focusing on your breath. For example, you may do 5 minutes first thing in the morning and 5 minutes during your lunch break. During this time, keep your attention totally on your breath while letting your thoughts come and go in the background. And each time you notice your attention come and go in the background, notice your attention has wandered, gently bring it back. Also, if you haven't already tried it, then try slowly saying to yourself, thinking. Whenever a thought or image appears, some people find this very helpful as a way of acknowledging the thinking process without getting catch up in it. However, if you don't find it helpful, then don't bother with it. Realistic expectations. The views and skill are essential for escaping the happiness trap. If you can see your thoughts for what they are, just words, and let them come and go without focusing on them, then you can put your time and energy into more important things, such as taking action to create the life you want. Your mind will never stop telling you unpleasant stories, at least not for long. That's just what minds do. So let's be realistic. The fact is, you will get hooked up and reeled in by these stories again and again. That's the bad news. The good news is, you can make dramatic improvement. You can learn to get hooked much less often. You can learn to recognize much faster when you have been hooked, and you can learn to get much better at unhooking yourself. All this ability will help to keep you out of the happiness trap. As for the observing self, you have only to just begin to scratch the surface. The observing self is a very powerful ally in transforming your life, and we will return to it many times in later chapter. Meanwhile, we now come to the final chapter on the fusion, in which we learn how to deal with scary pictures. Chapter 8. Scary Pictures. Roxy trembled, her face was pale and drawn, her eyes teary. "What's the diagnosis?" I asked her. "Multiple sclerosis," she whispered. Roxy was a 32-year-old lawyer dedicated to her profession. One day, Roxy noticed a weakness and numbness in her left leg, and within a few days, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or MS. MS is a disease in which the nerve in the body degenerate, creating all sort of physical problem. In the best case scenario, you may have one fleeting episode of neurological disturbance from which you fully recover, never to be bothered again. In the worst case, the MS steadily worsens and your nervous system progressively deteriorates until you are severely physically disabled. Doctors have no way of predicting how it will affect a patient. Not surprisingly, this was extremely distressing news for Roxy, a frightening diagnosis with no way of predicting the outcome. Roxy's mind had always had a tendency to imagine the worst. This is a useful trait for lawyers because it allowed them to anticipate every possible problem in a criminal or a civil case. But now this trait became a hindrance as Roxy kept imagining herself in a wheelchair, her body horribly deformed, her mouth twisted and drooling. Every time this image popped into her head, it terrified her. She tried telling herself as all the usual common sense things. "Don't worry, it will probably never happen to you. Your genes are excellent. Cross that bridge and when you come to it. What's the point of worrying about something that may never happen?" Friends, family, and doctors had also tried to reassure her with a similar advice, but that got rid of the scary image not in the least. Roxy found she could sometimes push the image out of her head, but it wouldn't stay away for long. When it returned, it seems to bother her even more than before. This commonly used but ineffective control strategy is known as thought suppression. Thought suppression means actively pushing distressing thoughts or images out of your head. For example, each time an unwanted thought or image appears, you might say to yourself, "No, don't think about it, stop it." Or you might just mentally shove it away. Research shows that although this method often gets rid of distressing thoughts or images in the short term, afterward there is a rebound effect. The negative thoughts return in a greater numbers and intensity than before. Most of us have a tendency to conjure up frightening images of the future. How often have you seen yourself failing, being rejected, making a fool of yourself, losing your job, getting sick, growing old and weak, or getting into trouble of some kind? In a stage of cognitive functions, this mental picture seems incredibly real, as if what we are imagining were actually taking place here and now. Naturally, this can create a lot of fear. And to paraphrase Mark Twain, we live through many frightening experiences in our lifetime, and most of the time never happen. Unpleasant or unnerving images will pop up again and again whenever we are faced with a challenge in life, and we can waste a lot of precious time dwelling on them or trying to get rid of them. Moreover, if we completely fused with these images, they may seem so frightening that they scare us away from doing the things we value. For example, many people avoid air travel because their minds conjure up images of the plane crashing. In cognitive functions, we take these images seriously, give them all our attention, react to them as if they are actually happening, treat them as if they are inaccurate predictions of the future. In cognitive diffusions, we recognize that images are nothing more than pictures. Pay attention to them only if they are helpful. The diffusion technique we use with images are very similar to the ones we use with thoughts. Initially, we need to focus on these images in order to practice diffusing them. But the ultimate aim is to be able to let these images come and go without giving them much attention at all. Diffusion technique helps us to see these images for what they are, nothing more than colorful picture. Once we recognize this and we can let them be there without fighting them, without judging them, without trying to avoid them. In other words, we can accept them. Acceptance means we no longer have to fear them. Acceptance means we no longer waste our precious energy on struggling with them. And ultimately, acceptance means we can focus on something more constructive. Before trying out the following technique, it's important to say a few words about painful memories. We store memories with all five senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. The techniques that follow are often helpful with visual memories, that is, memories which have been stored primarily as images in cognitive functions. We give these memories all our attention. We react to them as if they are happening here and now. We react to them as if they are dangerous or harmful. In cognitive diffusion, we recognize these memories are nothing more than pictures. Know that they happen in the past and can no longer hurt us. Pay attention to them only if they are helpful. However, when working with memories, you need to be careful. While the techniques in this chapter are helpful for coming to terms with many unpleasant memories, such as times you have failed, screwed up, been rejected, humiliated, or embraced, they may not be appropriate for more traumatic memories. If you are deeply distressed by traumatic memories of rape, torture, child abuse, domestic violence, or other serious incidents, I don't recommend you to use this method by using it instead. You should learn how to diffuse such memories with an appropriately trained therapist, diffusing unpleasant images. No technique known to humanity is 100% reliable, and diffusion techniques are no exceptions. If you find that a particular technique does not work, just notice that what it's like to be fused and move on to the different one. For each technique, first read through the instruction, then bring to mind a troublesome image that tends to recur. If it's a moving image, condense it into a 10-second video clip. Next, put the book down and try the technique. If any technique seems inappropriate, don't do it. Television screen. Bring an unpleasant image to mind and notice how it's affecting you. Now imagine there is a small television screen across the room from you. Place your image on the television screen, play around with the image, flip it upside and down, turn it on its side, spin it around and around, stretch it sideways. If it's moving video clip, play it in a slow motions. Then play it backward in a slow motions. Then play it forward at a double speed. Then reverse it at a double speed. Turn the color down so it's all in the black and white. Turn the color and brightness up until it's ridiculously lurid. So the people have bright orange skin and the color are hot pink, and the idea is not to get rid of the image but to see it for what it is, a harmless picture. You may need to do this for anything from 10 seconds to the 2 minutes until you really diffuse it. If at the end of the 2 minutes it's still bothering you, then try the next technique. Silly subtitle or voice overs. Keeping that image on the television screen, add the humorous subtitle or voice over to it, such as The Ultimate Disaster premieres on Channel 4 Friday 7:30 p.m. or no showing at a movie theater near you. I got rejected by my lover. If this image is linked to a story that you have already named, then use the name on the subtitle or voice over. For example, an image of your failing might be subtitled The Failure Story. If it's still bothering you at the end of another 30 seconds, try the next technique. Musical soundtrack. Keeping the image on the television screen, add the musical soundtrack of your choice. Experiment with a few different soundtracks: jazz, hip-hop, classical, rock, or your favorite movie themes. If the image is still bothering you, try the next technique. Shifting locations. Visualize this image in a variety of different locations. Stay with each scenario for 20 seconds before shifting to a new one. Visualize your image on a t-shirt of a joker or rock star. Visualize it painted on a canvas or on a banner flying behind an aeroplane. Visualize it as a bumper sticker, as the magazine photo, or as a tattoo on someone's back. Visualize it as a pop-up on a computer screen or a poster in a teenager bedroom. Visualize it as in the image on a postage stamp or as a drawing in a comic book, and use your imagination with this. The sky's the limit. If you are so fused with the image after all, that is, if it's still upsetting you, frightening you, or taking up all your attention whenever it appears, then I would suggest you're practicing running through some or all the above exercise every single day for at least 5 minutes. This is what I asked Roxy to do, and within a week, that image of herself in a wheelchair was no longer bothering her. It's still appearing from time to time, but it no longer frightened her, and she was able to let it come and go while she stayed focused on more important things. And paradoxically, the less she tried to push the image away, the less often it appeared. This was not the intention, but it's something that often happens as a positive side effect. It makes sense when you think about the rebound effect, which so often occurs when you try to push your thoughts and the images away. For less troublesome images, you can easily adapt others diffusion technique. Instead of I am having the thought that I acknowledge, you can acknowledge I'm having the image of, for example, I'm having the image of screwing up the interview. If the image is a memory, you could try I'm having the memory of blah blah blah. You could even think my mind's showing me a picture of blah blah blah. Instead of naming the story, you can name the picture. For example, aha, the lonely and miserable picture. You can even name the memory, aha, the nasty rejections memory. And you can always say thanks, mind, for whatever pictures it sends you. And here is one final technique for troublesome images. Changing genres. This is the most useful with the movie images. First, convert the image into a short video clip, then visualize it on a television screen. Now try playing that clip in different film genres. For example, imagine it as a gangster movie, a western, a trashy soap opera, a sci-fi thriller, a Disney cartoon, or a musical. It's time you switch genres. Change the clothes, sets, and acting styles, but don't try to alter what actually happens. Keep the basic story exactly the same. Play it over and over in different genres until you can truly see that this is just a moving picture and nothing more. Remember, diffusion is all about acceptance. The idea is not to get rid of these images, but to let go of struggling with them. Why should you accept them? Because the reality is, for the rest of your life, in one form or another, scary pictures will appear. Remember, your mind evolved from a don't get killed device. It saves and centers hides by sending them a warning, an image of a bear sleeping in the back of the cave, or of a hungry saber-toothed tiger crouch on that rock. So after 100,000 years of evolution, your mind is not suddenly going to say, oh, hang on a minute, all the wolves and bears have disappeared now. I don't need to keep sending out this warning anymore. Sorry, but minds don't work like that. Again, don't believe this just because I say so. Check your own experience despite everything you have tried over the years. It's not a fact that your mind still produces unpleasant pictures. So we need to learn how to live with these things, to pay them attention if they are helpful, or let them come and go if they are not. And once again, I have to prepare you, when you practice this technique, or unpleasant image will often disappear, or at least reduce it in frequency, and you will often feel much better. But remember, these outcomes are merely beneficial byproduct, not the main aim. If you start diffusing thoughts or images with the aim of getting rid of them, then you are not truly accepting them. Rather, Chapter 9, Demons on the Boat. Imagine you are steering a ship far out at sea. Below the deck, out of sight, lies a vast horde of demons, all with enormous claws and razor-sharp teeth. These demons have many different forms. Some of them are emotions such as guilt, anger, fear, or hopelessness. Some are memories of times you have failed, screwed up in, or been hurt. Others are thoughts like, it's too hard, I will make a fool of myself, or I will fail. Some of them are mental images in which you see yourself performing badly or getting rejected. Others are strong urge to think too much, smoke, harm yourself, or overeat. And still others are unpleasant sensations such as tightness in your chest or a knot in your stomach. Now, as long as you keep that ship drifting out at sea, the demons will stay below, but as soon as you start steering toward land, they clamber up from below deck, flapping their membranous wings, baring their fangs, and generally threatening to tear you into little pieces. Not surprisingly, you don't like that very much, so you cut the deal. If you demons stay out of sight, don't below. I will keep the ship drifting out at sea. The demons agree and everything seems okay for a while. The problem is, eventually you get fed up of being at sea, you get bored and lonely, miserable, resentful and anxious. You see plenty of other ships heading into shore, but not yours. What sort of life is this? You think, that land over there, that's where I want to be heading. But the demons down below are not particularly interested in what you want. They want you to stay out at sea and that's final. So the moment you start heading for land, they swarm up onto the deck and start threatening you again. The interesting thing is, although these demons threaten you, they never actually cause you any physical harm. Why not? Because they cannot. All they can do is scroll and wave their claws and look terrifying. Physically, they cannot even touch you, and once you realize this, you are free. It means you can take your ship wherever you want as long as you're willing to accept the demon's presence. All you have to do to reach land is accept that the demons are above deck and accept that they are doing their level best to scare you and keep steering the ship towards shore. The demons may howl and protest, but they are powerless because they powerless totally on your belief in their threats. But if you are not willing to accept this demon, if you have got to keep them below deck at all costs, then your only option is to stay adrift at sea. Of course, you can try to throw the demon overboard, but while you are busy doing that, no one is steering the ship, so you run the risk of crashing into rocks or capsizing. Besides that, it's a struggle you could never win because there is an infinite number of those demons in the hold. But that's horrible, you may well protest. I don't want to live surrounded by demons. Well, I'm sorry to be a bearer of bad news, but you already are. And those demons will keep showing up again and again, and as soon as you start to take your life in a failure direction. Why so? Again, it all stems back to evolution. Remember, the mind of our ancestor had one overriding imperative: don't get killed. And an important factor in not getting yourself killed is to get to know your environment. The better you know the terrain and the local wildlife, then obviously the safer you are. Whereas venturing into unknown territory exposes you to all sorts of exotic dangers, so if one of our ancestors decided to explore a new area, his mind would go into a state of red alert. Look out, be careful. Could be a crocodile in the pond or a leopard in the bushes, and thanks to evolutions, our modern minds do the same, only far more extensively. Thus, as soon as we start to do something new, our mind will start warning us. You might fail, you might make a mistake, you might get rejected. Yeah, a lot of people will complain to you or give a bad mouth to you, or something that you do. It warns us with negative thoughts, with disturbing images or bad memories, and with an uncomfortable feeling and sensation. And all too often we let this warning stop us from taking our life in a direction we really want. Rather than sail for shore, we drift at sea. Some people call this staying in your comfort zone, but that's not a good name for it because the comfort zone is definitely not comfortable. It should be called the misery zone or the missing out on life zone. In later chapters, when we start focusing on your values and on taking action to change your life for the better, these statements are going to challenge you. Depending on nature of your current problems, you may choose to pursue a new career, start a new relationship, make some new friends, improve your physical fitness, and are engaged in some challenging project like writing a novel, taking a course, or enrolling in higher education. And what I guarantee you is this: Whatever meaningful changes you start to make in your life, those demons will rear their ugly heads and try to discourage you. That's the bad news. Now here's the good news. If you keep steering your ship toward the shore, no matter how much the demons threaten you, many of them will realize you are having no effect and will give up and leave you alone. As for the ones in the remain, after a while you will get used to them, and if you take a long look at them, you will realize they are not necessarily they are not really nearly as scary as they first appear. You will realize they have been using special effects to make themselves look a lot bigger than they really are. Sure, they will still look ugly, they won't turn into cute, fluffy bunny rabbit, but you'll find them much less frightening, and more importantly, you will find that you can let them hang around without being bothered by them. Furthermore, if you keep sailing toward that shore, you won't just have demons for company, you will soon encounter angels and mermaids and dolphins. So, one of my main aims in this book is to help you see through special effect of your demons and to see them as they really are, so that they no longer intimidate you and no longer dictate where you steer your ship. We have already started to do this with thoughts and images, and next we are going to do it with emotion. But before moving on, take a few moments to think about the changes you would like to make in your life. Ask yourself: 1. How would I act differently if painful thoughts and feelings were no longer an obstacle? 2. What project or activities would I start or continue if my time and energy were not consumed by troublesome emotions? 3. What would I do if fear were no longer an issue? 4. What would I attempt if thoughts of failure didn't deter me? Please take at least 10 minutes to think about these questions. Better yet, write down your answer for the future references. When you contemplate these 4 questions, what troublesome thoughts and images comes to mind? Do you visualize yourself getting hurt in some way? Does your thinking style self tell you it's hopeless, or it's too hard, or that you cannot make these changes because you are too weak, too inadequate, too depressed, anxious, stupid, unlovable? Write a list of these troublesome thoughts and images, and once you have done it, set aside 5 minutes a day to practice diffusing them. And when your mind makes up some excuse for not practicing, please remember to thank it. As I have said several times before, practice is the key to success. The more you can see these thoughts for what they are, nothing more than words and pictures, the less influence they will have over your life. Diffusion is a big topic, and we will come back to it at a later stages. For now, we will focus on painful emotion, which most people find the scariest demons of all. And in the next chapter, we will look at the emotion from a scientific perspective, discover how they are created, and explore a few myths about them. And after that, you will learn how to fundamentally transform the way you handle them. Chapter 10. How do you feel? If you are trekking through the Alaska wilderness and you suddenly come face to face with a huge grizzly bear, what would you do? Scream? Call for help? Run away? We will return to that question a bit later after we have answered what are emotions. Scientists have a hard time reaching any kind of consensus on what emotions actually are, but most experts agree on 3 things. 1. Emotions originate from the middle layer of the brain, known as the midbrain. And 2. At the core of any emotion is a complex series of physical changes throughout the body. 3. These physical changes prepare us to take action. Physical changes in the body may include alternation in heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tone, circulation, and hormone level, as well as the activation of different parts of the nervous system. We noticed these changes are sensations such as butterflies in the stomach, a lump in the throat, watering eye, or clammy hands. We also notice them as urge to act in a particular way, such as to cry, laugh, or hide. Emotions influence us to act in different ways. For example, under the influence of any strong emotion, we commonly make changes to our voice, facial expression, body posture, and behavior. The likelihood that we will act in a particular way when experiencing a particular emotion is known as an action's tendency, but notice the key word here, tendency. A tendency means we have the inclination to do something. It doesn't mean we have to do it, that we have no choice. It doesn't mean we are forced or compelled to act in a particular way. It just means we tend to act that way. So, for example, if you are anxious about running late, you might have the tendency to drive above the speed limit, but you can still choose to drive legally and safely if you wish. Or if you are angry with someone, you may have a tendency to yell at them, but you can choose to talk calmly if you wish. To understand what constitutes an emotion, let's take a look at anxiety. The experience of anxiety varies from person to person and it does an emotion, but it may include some or all of the following. Physical changes such as raised blood pressure, increased heart rate, increased sweating, extra blood flow to the legs, or a faster rate of breathing. Sensations such as a tightness in the chest, racing heart, churning stomach, trembling legs, shaking hand, or sweaty palm. Urges such as an urge to run away or to quit what you are doing. An action tendency such as tendency to fidget, talk rapidly, or pace up and down. And people often notice this action tendency as an urge, the urge to fidget, and etc. Emotions are closely tied up with thoughts, memories, and images. For instance, when you are feeling afraid, you may have thought about what might go wrong. Memories of other times you have felt afraid of mental images and of anything from a car crash to heart attack. One particular type of thought process is so intimately linked to our emotions that some experts consider it a core component. This is the process of making sense of or giving meaning to our experience. For example, with sadness you have a sense of loss, and with fear you have a sense of danger. The word emotions is derived from the Latin ex movere, meaning to move out or excite, and many of the names we give to our emotion are derived from ancient word for physical sensation. For example, anguish, angst, anger, and anxiety all stem from the Latin angere, which means to choke, a reference to the tightness in the throat often associated with such emotion. For the sake of clarity, whenever I use the term emotion and feeling, I am referring primarily to the physical sensation and urge that we experience, rather than to the meanings or thoughts associated with them. Do our emotions control our behavior? The answer to this is quite simply no. Our emotions definitely do not control our behavior. For example, you can feel angry but act calmly. You may have the tendency to shout, grimace, clench your fists, or lash out physically or verbally, but you don't have to. You can, if you choose, speak slowly and calmly, maintain a look of serenity on your face, and hold your body in an open, relaxed posture. I am sure that at some point in your life you have felt afraid, yet you persisted in the face of that fear even though you felt like running away. In other words, you had a tendency to run, but you chose not to. We all have experienced this, for instance, when sitting for an exam, asking someone for a date, going for a job interview, speaking before a group, or partaking in a dangerous sport. You already know that whenever I give a speech in public, I experience anxiety, and yet when I reveal this to my audience, as I usually do, they are always amazed. But you look so calm and confident, they say. That's because even though I'm feeling anxious, racing heart, churning stomach, sweaty palm, I'm not acting anxious. Yeah, anxiety typically gives us the tendency to fidget, breathe rapidly, or talk fast. Yet I do the very opposite of this thing. I consciously choose to talk slowly, breathe slowly, and move slowly. The same is true for virtually all public speakers. Even after years of experience, they still commonly feel anxious, but you would never know it, because they act calm. Think of the poker player who keeps his face deadpan even when he is feeling intense emotion. Think of the professional actor who can bring to life all facial expression, physical gesture, and vocal changes of sheer panic, even though the actor himself may be feeling quite calm. Method actors obviously are a different story. Think of the times when you have put on a happy face even though you were feeling terrible. In all these cases, the actions are distinct from the emotions. Now let's return to the opening scenario to this chapter. You are trekking through the Alaska wilderness and you meet a grizzly bear. Obviously, you will feel instant fear. Undoubtedly, you will feel the urge to turn and run. But if you have read your survival manual, you will know that's about the worst thing you could possibly do. If you turn and run, you will inside The bear spurs with instinct. It will chase after you and easily outrun you within seconds, and after that, you are bear fodder. Now, although there is some discussion among the experts about the best response, they tend to agree that a good rule is to back away slowly without any sudden moves and or loud noises and never turn your back on the bear. Many people have survived by following this advice. They all felt terrible fear that much was out of their control, but they were able to control how they acted. So here's the point I'm trying to hammer home. Although you don't have much direct control over your feeling, you can directly control your actions. This realization will have important practical implications later because when it comes to making important changes in your life, it's far more useful to focus on what you can control rather than on what you cannot. Of course, there are some reflex reactions that cannot be controlled. For example, if I go to poke you in the eye, your eyelids will instantly close. You cannot control that. Even if I offered you $1 million, you wouldn't be able to keep your eyelids from closing. But such a reflexes are the exception. The vast majority of our actions can be controlled provided we are consciously aware of them. The idea that emotions control your action is a very powerful illusion. Physiologist Hangrab compares this illusion to that of a sunset. When we watch a sunset, the sun appears to be sinking below the horizon, but in fact, the sun is not moving at all. It's the earth that's moving, rotating on its axis so that we are actually moving away from the sun. And even though we have all learned this at school, it's so easy to forget. When you are watching that sunset, it's almost impossible to believe that the sun is stationary and that it's actually the ground you are standing on that is moving. When we are feeling strong emotion, we may do all short of things we later regret. We may smash things, shout, abuse people, drink excessively, or engage in any number of destructive behaviors. And it seems as if the emotion were causing us to do this, but basically it's not. We are only acting this way because we have developed bad habits. But if we consciously bring our awareness to how we are feeling and consciously observe how we are behaving, then no matter how intense our emotions are, we can still control our actions. Even when you are furious or terrified, you can stand up or sit down, close your mouth, drink a glass of water, answer the telephone, go to the toilet, or scratch your head. You cannot stop yourself from feeling angry or afraid, but you certainly can control how you behave. The problem is our society perpetuates the myth that emotions control our behavior. For example, we talk about being driven by fear, seized by anger, or overwhelmed by guilt. We justify our behavior by saying things like, I was so angry, I couldn't help it, and I was too depressed to do anything. And with expressions like, my fear got the better of me or my anger took over. So when we grow up hearing people talk this way, we readily come to believe that our emotions control us, and it's a powerful illusion to shake. What about those cases where people get paralyzed by fear? It's true that in a very rare instance, when people find themselves in a genuinely life-threatening situation, they may become temporarily paralyzed by fear, whether like a rabbit frozen in the headlights, but 99.9% of the time when we talk about being paralyzed by fear, it is not the literal truth. It's just a metaphor, a colorful turn of phrase. The person is not truly physically incapable of taking action. He or she is simply choosing not to. The emotions are like the weather. Emotions are like the weather. They are always present and constantly changing. They continually ebb and flow from mild to intense, pleasant to unpleasant, predictable to utterly unexpected. A mood refers to general tone of emotion across a period of time. A feeling refers to a discrete episode of emotion with distinctive, recognizable characteristic. In our weather analogy, a bad mood is akin to an overcast day, whereas a feeling of anger or anxiety is akin to a storm. We are always experiencing emotion of some sort, just as there is always weather of some sort, although sometimes it is not strong enough or distinct enough for us to describe it easily, or perhaps even to notice it. At such times, if someone asks us how we are feeling, we might say fine, or I'm not feeling anything in particular. Some people are very much in touch with their emotions, while others are, to various degrees, disconnected from them. Likewise, some people are very good at talking about their feeling, while others have great difficulty doing so and may be limited to simply The simple expressions such as I feel good, I feel bad, or I feel funny, although we may say someone has no feeling, the truth is such people do not exist. Everyone has emotion and feeling, regardless of or whether they are in touch with them or able to express them in the words. The three phases of emotions. There are three phases in the creation of an emotion. Phase 1, a significant event. An emotion is triggered by some sort of significant event. This event may happen inside your body, a distressing memory, a painful sensation, or a disturbing thought. Or it may happen in the world around you, something you can see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. Your brain notices this event and alerts you that it's important. Phase 2, get ready for actions. The brain starts to evaluate this event. Is it good or bad, beneficial or harmful? At the same time, the brain starts to arouse the body for actions, either to approach or to avoid the event. In this phase, there is no distinctive feeling in the usual sense of the word. In the brain judges the event as harmful, the fight or flight response is triggered, and our body prepares to either attack or escape. If the brain judges the event as potentially helpful, our body prepares to approve and explore it. And as our body gets ready for action, we experience a variety of sensation and urge. Phase 3, the mind gets involved. In the third phase, our mind starts attaching words, idea, and meaning to the changes happening in our body. For example, the mind may give our sensation and urge a label such as frustration or joy or feeling loosey, and what our mind tells us about this sensation has a significant impact on how we relate to them. For example, imagine two people on a roller coaster, and one of them is terrified, the other is exhilarated. Both are experiencing the same physical changes, raised adrenaline level, increased blood pressure, the same physical sensation, churning stomach, pounding heart, and the same urge to scream. But their subjective experiences are very different, depending on what their minds tell them. One mind says, "This is fun." The other mind says, "This is dangerous." Guess who feels exhilarated and who feels frightened? In the same way, one performance stage fright can be another performance adrenaline rush. Both performers experience the same sensation, like racing heart, shaking legs, and so on, but their minds interpret the sensation very differently. The fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is a primitive survival reflex that originates in the midbrain. It has evolved on the basis that if something is threatening you, your best change of survival is either to run away, flight, or to stand your ground and defend yourself, fight. Your heart rate speeds up, your body floods with adrenaline, blood stunned to the large muscle of your arm and legs, and your breathing increases to give you more oxygen, all of which primes you to flee or else stay and fight. So whenever we perceive a threat, the fight or flight response immediately activates. In prehistoric times, this response was life-saving. When a bully mammoth charged you, if you couldn't escape, your only hope was to kill it or at least fight it off. However, in this modern age, most of us rarely find ourselves in a life-threatening predicament, and the fight or flight response is often triggered in situations where it is of little or no use to us. Once again, evolution is the culprit here. Our mind trying to make sure we don't get killed. Sees potential danger almost everywhere, in a moody spouse, a controlling boss, a parking ticket, a new job, traffic jam, a long line at the bank, a big mortgage, and unflattering reflection in the mirror, you name it. The threat may even come from the mind itself, in the form of a disturbing thought or image, obviously. None of these things are actually life-threatening, but our brain and body react as if they were. If our brain judges an event as harmful, the flight or fight response is triggered and it rapidly evolves into unpleasant feelings such as fear, anger, shock, disgust, or guilt. If our brain judges the event as good or beneficial, we rapidly develop a pleasant feeling such as calm, curiosity, or happiness. The former feelings we tend to describe as negative, the latter feelings we tend to describe as positive. But actually, they are neither positive nor negative, they are all simply feelings. Well, you may be saying, saying they may be simply feeling, but I much prefer the positive one to the negative ones. Of course, you do. So does everybody. It's a human nature. But unfortunately, these preferences often become so important to us that it leads to serious problem, contributing to something I call the struggle switch. Care to find out more and then keep reading. Chapter 11: The Struggle Switch. Have you ever seen one of those old movies where the bad guy falls into a pool or a quicksand and the more he struggles, the faster it sucks him under? If you should ever fall into quicksand struggling in the worst thing you can possibly do, what you are supposed to do is lie back, spread your arm and lie as still as possible, floating on the surface. Then resolve for your horse to come and rescue you. Acting effectively in this situation is tricky because every instinct tells you to try to escape. But if you don't stop struggling, pretty soon you will sink beneath the surface. Sure, it's not exactly fun to be floating on the quicksand, but it beats the hell out of drowning in it. The same principle applies to difficult feelings. The more we try to fight them, the more they smother us. Now, why should this be? Well, imagine that at the back of your mind is a switch. We will call it the struggle switch. When it's switched on, it means we are going to struggle against any physical or emotional pain that comes our way. Whatever discomfort we experience, we will try to get rid of it or avoid it. For instance, suppose the emotion that shows up is anxiety. If our struggle switch is on, then the feeling is completely unacceptable. So we could end up with anger about our anxiety. How dare they make me feel like this? Or sadness about our anxiety. Not again, this is tragic. Or anxiety about our anxiety. This cannot be for me. I wonder what it's doing to my body. Or guilt about our anxiety. I shouldn't let myself get so worked up. I should know better. Once again, I'm acting like a child, or maybe even a mixture of all these feelings once. What all these secondary emotions have in common is that they are unpleasant, unhelpful, and a drain on our energy and vitality. And then we get angry or anxious or depressed about that. Spot the vicious cycle. Now imagine what happens if our struggle switch is off. In this case, whatever emotions show up, no matter how unpleasant, we don't struggle with it. Thus, when anxiety show up, it's not a problem. Sure, it's an unpleasant feeling and we don't like it, but it's nothing terrible. With the struggle switch off, our anxiety level are free and to rise and follow as the situation dictates. Sometimes they will be high, sometimes low, and sometimes there will be no anxiety at all. But more importantly, we are not wasting our time and energy struggling with it. Without struggle, we get is a natural level of physical and emotional discomfort depending on who we are and the situation we are in. In act, we call this clean discomfort. There is no avoiding clean discomfort. Life serve is up to all of us in one way or another. But once we start struggling with it, our discomfort level increases rapidly, and all that additional suffering we call dirty discomfort. Our struggle switch is like an emotion amplifier. If we switch it on, we can have anger about our anxiety, and anxiety about our anger, depression about our depressions, or guilt about our guilt. We could even have guilt about our anger, about our anxiety, and then depressions about that. But it doesn't stop with there. With our struggle switch on, we are completely unwilling to accept the presence of this uncomfortable feeling, which means not only do we get emotionally distressed by them, we also do whatever we can to get rid of them or distract ourselves from them. For some people, this means turning to drug or alcohol, which then leads to addictions, relationships issue, and whole host of other messy problems. Others may turn to food as a distraction, which can then lead to obesity or eating disorder. Humans find an almost infinite number of ways to try to avoid, to get rid of unpleasant feeling, from smoking and sex to shopping and surfing the internet. And as we saw earlier, most of these control strategies are no big deal, as long as they are used in moderation, but any of them is problematic if used excessively. For example, I have had clients who developed huge credit card debt from excessive shopping, and others who destroyed their relationship by making unreasonable sexual demand. All the secondary problem, and this painful feeling associated with them fall under the heating, dirty discomfort. With the struggle switch off, our emotions are free to move. We don't waste time and energy fighting or avoiding them. We don't generate all that dirty discomfort. With the struggle switch on, our emotions are stuck. We waste a huge amount of time and energy struggling with them. We create a lot of painful and unhelpful dirty discomfort. Take the case of Russell, a 43-year-old legal secretary. Russell suffered from panic disorder, a condition characterized by sudden episodes of overwhelming fear, so-called panic attack. During a panic attack, the sufferer has an intense feeling of the impending doom associated with distressing sensations such as breathlessness, chest pain, a thumping heart, choking, dizziness, tingling in the hands and feet, hot and cold flushes, sweating, faintness, and trembling. This is a common disorder affecting up to 3% of the population in any given year. Russell's major problem is actually her intense dislike of anxiety. She thinks anxiety is something terrible and dangerous, and she will do anything possible to avoid it. This means that as soon as she feels any sensation that remotely resembles anxiety, such as a racing heart or tightness in the chest, the sensation will itself trigger further anxiety. Then as her anxiety level rises, the unwanted sensation grow even stronger. This in turn trigger even more anxiety until soon she is in a state of a full-blown panic. Russell's world is steadily shrinking. She now avoids drinking coffee, reading thrillers, watching scary movies, or doing any physical exercise. Why? Because all these things make her heart beat faster, which can then set off the whole fear vicious cycle. She also refuses to ride in elevator or aeroplanes, drive on busy roads, visit crowded shopping centers, or attend large social gathering because she fears she might feel anxious in those situations, and that might lead her to have a panic attack, which is something which she wants to avoid at any cost. Russell's case is an extreme example, but to a lesser extent we all do the same thing. All of us, at times, avoid challenges in order to escape the stress or anxiety that goes with them. And as I have said before, in moderation this is not the problem. But the more habitual that avoidance becomes, the more we start to suffer in the long run. Yes, that all makes sense, I hear you say, but how can I stop struggling with a difficult feeling when they feel so bad? The answer is by using a simple technique called expansion. But before we come to that, there is an interesting bit of history we need to explore. Chapter 12. How the struggle switch developed. As you read through the emotion listed below, just notice, without thinking too hard about it, which ones you automatically judge as a good or positive, and which you automatically judge as bad or negative. Fear, anger, shock, disgust, sadness, guilt, love, joy, curiosity. You have just read a list of 9 basic human emotions from which all others are derived by combination. At least this is what many scientists believe. I'm still the subject of considerable debate. Most people tend to automatically judge the first 6 emotions as bad or negative and the last 3 as a good or positive. Why is this so? It's largely because of the stories we believe about emotions. Our thinking self loves to tell us stories, and we know how they affect us when we fuse with them. Here are some of the many unhelpful stories that our thinking self may tell us about emotions. Anger, guilt, shame, fear, sadness, embarrassment, and anxiety are negative emotions. Negative emotions are bad, dangerous, irrational, and a sign of a weakness. Negative emotions, which mean I am physiologically defective. Negative emotions will damage my health. People should hide their feelings. Expressing feelings is a sign of weakness. Strong emotion mean I am out of control. Women shouldn't feel angry. Men shouldn't feel afraid. I must keep my emotion under that tight control. If I don't control my emotions, something bad will happen. Negative emotion mean there is something wrong with my life. You might agree with some of or all of the above, or you might have beliefs that are quite different. It depends largely on your upbringing. If you grew up in a family where positive emotions were freely expressed but negative emotions were frowned upon, then you quickly learn that the negative ones were to be avoided. If your family tended to suppress or hide their feeling, then you learn to keep your feeling bottled up. If your parents believe in getting anger off your chest, you may have learned that it's good to express anger. But if you were frightened by your parents' display of anger, you may have decided that anger is bad and should therefore be suppressed or avoided. What was your childhood programming? It's a useful exercise to spend some time thinking about your childhood programming regarding emotions. This can often give you an insight into how and why you struggle with a certain feeling, and please take some time to write some answers or at least think about them to the following questions. As you were growing up, what messages were you given about emotions? Which emotions were you told were desirable or undesirable? What were you told about the best way to handle your emotions? What emotions did your family freely express? What emotions did your family suppress or frown on? With what emotions was your family comfortable? With what emotions was your family uncomfortable? How did the adults in your family handle their own negative emotions? What emotional control strategies did they use? How did the adult in your family react to your negative emotions? And what did you learn from observing all this as you grew up? As a result of all this programming, what ideas are you still carrying around today about your emotions and how to handle them? Judging our emotions. Yeah, one reason we tend to judge our emotions as bad or negative is because they feel unpleasant. They create uncomfortable sensation in our bodies. We don't like the sensation, so we don't want them. On the other hand, we do like pleasant sensations, so naturally we want more of them. If you judge an emotion as good, you will probably try hard to get more of it, and if you judge it as a bad, you are apt to try even harder to get rid of it. Thus, judging sets you up for a struggle with your feeling. In ACT, we encourage you to let go of judging your feeling altogether and to see them for what they are, a stream of constantly changing sensation and urge continually passing through your body. Just because some of these sensation and urge are uncomfortable does not mean they are bad. For example, if you grew up in a family where people didn't openly express love and affection, then you may find lovey feelings uncomfortable. Does that mean they are bad? And isn't it interesting that many people judge fear a bad emotion, yet they will pay good money to watch a horror movie or read a thriller precisely to experience that very feeling? So no emotion is in itself bad. Yeah, bad is just a thought, a judgment made by our thinking self. But if we fuse with that thought, if we literally believe that the feeling is bad, then naturally we will struggle with it all the harder, and we know where that leads. Any diffusion strategy can help you deal with unhelpful thoughts about your feeling. For example, suppose your mind says, I cannot stand this feeling. You could then acknowledge, I'm having the thought that I cannot stand this feeling, or more simply, you could replay, thanks mind. One strategy for dealing with judgment specifically is to label them as such. Suppose your mind says, this anxiety is terrible. You could then acknowledge, I'm making the judgment, this anxiety is terrible. Or suppose your mind says, this guilt is awful. You could then acknowledge, I'm making the judgment, this guilt is awful. Using this phrase makes you aware of the process of judging. Then you have a choice in how much you buy into this judgment. Alternatively, each time you notice a judgment, you can silently say to yourself, judging, and let it be. Notice that I said the aim is to let go of judging. I didn't say to stop judging. Your thinking self is an expert at judging, and it will never stop doing it for long. But you can learn to let go of this judgment more and more simply by diffusing them. As in the above examples, but what if the feeling really is awful? Then we come back to the pragmatic approach. Is this thought helpful? If you fuse with the thought, this feels awful, will it help you deal with your emotions, or does it simply make you feel worse? How the mind adds to our emotional discomfort. Judging is one of the most common ways to our mind adds to our emotional discomfort. However, there are plenty of others. Below is a list of common questions the mind asks, or a comment that it makes, which often stir up or intensify unpleasant feeling. Why am I feeling like this? These questions sets you up to run through all your problems one by one, seeing if you can pinpoint what caused your feeling. Naturally, this just makes you feel worse because it creates the illusion that your life is nothing but problems. It also leads to a lot of time lost in unpleasant thoughts. And does this process help you in any practical way? Does it help you take action to change your life for the better? What have I done to deserve this? This question sets you up for the self-blame. You rehearse all the bad things you have done so you can figure out why the universe decided to punish you. As a result, you end up feeling worthless, useless, and bad or inadequate. And again, does this help you in any practical way? Why am I like this? This question leads to your search through your entire life history looking for the reasons why you are the way you are. Frequently, this leads to feeling of anger, resentment, and helplessness, and it very often ends in blaming your parents. And does this help you in any practical way? What's wrong with me? This is another great question for setting you up to spend hours sifting through all your faults, flaws, and defects. And how do you usually feel as a result? I cannot handle it. Variation on this theme include I cannot stand it, I cannot cope, it's too overwhelming, I cannot take it anymore, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown, and so on. Your mind is basically feeding you the story that you are too weak to handle this, and something bad is going to happen if you keep feeling this way. And is this a helpful story to pay attention to? I shouldn't feel this like this. This is a classic where your mind picks an argument with reality. The reality is this. The way you are feeling right now is the way you are feeling, but your mind says reality is wrong. It's not supposed to be this way, and stop it. Give me a reality I want. And is this effective? Does it change anything? Can you ever win an argument with reality? I wish I didn't feel like this. Wishful thinking, one of the mind's favorite pastimes. I wish I felt more confident. I wish I didn't feel so anxious. This can keep us wrapped up in the second guessing ourselves for hours, imagining how our life could be so much better if only we felt differently. And does this help us deal with the life we have now? And the list could go on and on. Suffice it to say, the thinking self has lots of ways either to directly intensify our bad feeling or else to get us to waste a huge amount of time uselessly brooding on them. So from now on, intend to catch your mind in the act when it tries to hook you with this question and command. Then simply refuse to play the game. Thank your mind for trying to waste your time and focus instead on some useful or meaningful activity. You may find it helpful to say something to yourself like, "Thanks, mind, but I'm not playing today." The struggle switch revisited. Now you can see how the struggle switch got there. Our thinking self created it by telling us that uncomfortable feelings are bad or dangerous, that we cannot cope with them, that we are defective or damaged for having them, that they will take over or overwhelm us, that they are ruining our life, or that they will hurt us in some way. If we fuse with these stories, the switch goes on and we perceive uncomfortable emotion as a threat. And how does our brain respond to a threat? It activates the fight or flight response, which then gives rise to a whole new set of unpleasant feeling. To draw an analogy, suppose a distant relative shows up on your doorstep. You have never met this relative before, but you have been told a lot of stories about her. You have been told that she is bad, that she is dangerous, that no one can stand her, that the only relationship she has are with defective or damaged people, and that she always ends up hurting or damaging those people or taking control of them and ruining their life. If you truly believe the story, what would your attitude be toward this relative? Would you want her in your house? Would you want her anywhere near you? Of course not. You would do anything you could to get rid of her as fast as possible. But what if all those stories were false or exaggerated? What if this relative were actually an okay person who had just been the victim of malicious gossip? The only way you would ever find out would be to spend some time with her, put aside all the gossip and slander, and check her out for herself. You have probably already experienced something like this in your own life. Perhaps there was once someone at school or at work whom you have heard a lot of bad things about. Then you spend some time with them and discover they were nowhere near as bad as their reputation. You may also have experienced the opposite. You may have heard a lot of great stories about someone and then finally meet them only to discover they are not all they are cracked up to be. In both cases, the lesson is the same. Your own direct experience is more reliable than all the stories you have been told. And so, it is in learning to handle unpleasant emotion, what you need to do is have a direct experience of them to connect with them directly via your observing self, rather than automatically believing the stories of your thinking self. When you do this, you will discover that those feelings are nowhere near as bad as you thought, and you will realize that they cannot possibly hurt you or overwhelm you. The one thing that will help you in this process is more diffusion practice. Therefore, you should use the following technique several times a day whenever you find yourself getting caught up in an unhelpful judgment. And as always, don't have a great expectation. Just try them and notice what happens. If you have a judgmental thoughts such as X is bad, then simply acknowledge in making the judgment X is bad. Alternatively, if you notice an unhelpful judgment, then acknowledge its presence and silently note it as judging. Blah blah blah. Sometimes when I tell people that their emotions cannot hurt them, they mention the research which shows that chronic anger and depression can have a bad effect on your physical health. However, the key word here is chronic, which means ongoing over a long period of time. Painful emotions become chronic only when you struggle with them. Once you stop struggling, they are free to move, and they generally do so fairly quickly, although not always. So when you respond to your emotion with acceptance, they don't become chronic, and therefore they don't hurt you. Acceptance break the vicious cycle of struggle and free you to invest your time and energy in life-enhancing activities. And guess what? In the next chapter, you will learn how to do this.